You think you've won, Tina? I asked quietly as she signed the divorce papers, her lover smirking across the table. She smiled, calm, confident, sure she'd destroyed me. What she didn't know was that every secret, every lie, every message she'd ever sent had already been turned into a weapon, and tonight the world would see who she truly was. What followed wasn't just revenge. It was precision. Viewers, have you ever been betrayed so deeply that you chose silence over rage? Tell me, which one cuts deeper? Subscribe, like, comment and watch till the ending to share this interesting story to family and friends. My name is Kelvin, and this is the story of how silence became my most dangerous weapon. I'm 34, an IT systems analyst living in Lekki, Lagos, where glass towers meet flooded streets and everyone smiles through a secret. To most people, I was the quiet one, the guy who fixed their systems, helped them secure their data, and minded his own business. But in my marriage, that silence was misread. It wasn't peace. It was pressure quietly building. I met Tina 4 years ago at a tech expo in Abuja. She was everything I wasn't: vibrant, magnetic, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make people rearrange themselves just to be near her. She owned a small boutique then, Tina Luxe, and I was immediately drawn to her drive. We balanced each other, or so I thought. She said I grounded her, made her feel safe. I believed her. Back then, I believed everything. Our love was loud in the beginning. Trips to Tarkwa Bay, late-night shawarma runs, those long talks about building a life together. She'd talk about opening fashion branches across Nigeria, and I'd stay up all night coding apps that could help her manage them. We were a team, until success started making her see me differently. It began subtly. Her tone when she spoke to me. The way she'd scroll through her phone mid-conversation, smile at messages she'd never explain. I told myself it was stress, that maybe I wasn't giving enough attention. But deep down, something inside me started to freeze. Then came the night that turned everything. It was a Friday. I came home late from work, exhausted. She was in the living room, pacing, wearing that floral robe she only wore when she wanted to make a point. You think you can tell me what to do, Kelvin? She snapped. I just stared at her, too tired to argue. I'm not your slave, she continued. My ex is coming over tonight and you can't stop it. I remember standing there, hearing those words and realizing that whatever we had left had just died. But instead of shouting, instead of breaking things or begging, I smiled. A calm, slow, deliberate smile. And that scared her. I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of confusion, maybe even fear. Because the man she was used to breaking down wasn't standing there anymore. Something in me had shifted. Tina mistook my silence for surrender. But what she didn't know was that I'd already started thinking. Not emotionally, but strategically. See, I've spent my life in systems, studying how data flows, how codes can be broken or protected. And that night, I realized people aren't that different. Every betrayal has a pattern. Every liar leaves a trail. You just have to stop feeling and start watching. So I smiled again, walked past her and said, "Do whatever you need to, Tina." She thought that was permission. But what I really meant was, go ahead, write your own ending. The moment she said her ex was coming over, I didn't feel anger, just a strange, hollow stillness. It was the same calm I used to get right before solving a tough system bug. You stop panicking, start observing. That's how I looked at her that night, not as my wife anymore, but as a problem waiting to be debugged. She stood there, still pacing, eyes flicking toward the clock like she was counting down to freedom. The arrogance in her voice lingered in the air. You can't stop it. She wanted a reaction. A fight. Tears. Maybe even a slap she could use as justification later. But instead I smiled. And for a second I swear her body stiffened. Her face faltered just a fraction. Because she'd never seen me that calm before. You're smiling? She asked, voice sharp. Yeah, I said. You're finally being honest. I respect that. Then I walked away. Behind me she muttered, you'll regret this. But my mind was already running through a different kind of script. Not emotional, but digital. You see, Roland, her ex, wasn't just some random old flame. I knew him long before Tina ever mentioned his name. 2 years ago he was one of my clients. A freelance photographer who'd hired me to design a client management app. He never paid me the full balance. Said times were tough. So I let it go. Or so he thought. The app wasn't ordinary. It was built to sync metadata from every photo uploaded, GPS, timestamps, device IDs. A quiet fingerprint. Harmless, unless you knew how to read it. When I learned Roland was her ex, it clicked like lightning. This wasn't coincidence. I started remembering small things, the random calls she'd take in the kitchen, how she'd giggle like she used to when we first dated. How her phone would buzz at 2 a.m. and she'd flip it face down. I'd buried those suspicions for months under something I called love. But that smile, the one that scared her, was the moment love died. What was left was clarity. Later that night she came into the bedroom, hair wrapped, pretending calm. "So, you're fine with it?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "I trust you." She blinked, unsure if it was sarcasm or sincerity. "I mean it," I added, turning over on the bed. "Just don't make too much noise when he arrives." That hit her. I felt her freeze beside the bed, the air between us thick with confusion and unease. For the first time she didn't know what to expect from me. I heard her phone vibrate. A message from Roland, no doubt. I didn't turn around, but I smiled again, the kind of smile that hides storms behind it. Because in my mind I was already laying digital traps. If she wanted to bring him into my house, fine. But when they crossed that line, they'd walk right into a network I already owned. That's when I realized, the best revenge isn't rage. It's patience disguised as peace. And she had no idea what kind of peace she'd just awakened. By 9 p.m. the house no longer felt like a home. The air was tense, thick enough to taste. I sat in the living room, the only light coming from the dim bulb above the dining table. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Tina had been pacing for nearly 20 minutes, her phone in hand, her perfume heavy in the air, sweet but sharp, like she'd sprayed it just to leave a mark. She looked good. Too good. Red dress, gold anklet, that same confident smirk she wore when she thought she'd won. At 9:13 there was a knock at the door. 3 firm taps. She glanced at me, then flipped her hair back and whispered, "Don't start acting childish." "I wouldn't dare," I said softly. "After all, you're entertaining a guest." She rolled her eyes and opened the door. Roland stepped in like he owned the place, tall, dark-skinned, confident. He carried that kind of ego that filled any room before his voice even did. The smell of his cologne hit first, strong, musky, familiar. He grinned when he saw me. "Kelvin, right? I've heard so much about you." I stood, extended my hand and said, "Hope it was all good things." Tina laughed, but her laugh cracked halfway through. She hadn't expected me to play polite. I studied him. He had the kind of charm that fooled people easily, the way his words flowed, the practiced confidence. The same charm that probably drew Tina back into old habits. He looked around the house, whistled and said, "Nice setup, bro. You've got taste." "Thanks," I replied. "Built most of it myself." He didn't realize how literal that was. Every smart bulb, every camera, every connection point in that house was under my control. They both sat on the couch a little too close. I remained standing, my phone in hand, pretending to scroll. In reality, I'd opened my remote access console. My home network was already tracking every device within range. When Roland connected to the Wi-Fi, automatically, thanks to his synced history from when he'd once visited months ago, I smiled. Access granted. He didn't notice. Neither did she. As they talked, I could feel the rage humming under my skin like static, but I didn't let it surface. I listened instead. "Watch." She laughed at his jokes, placed her hand on his thigh once. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. At one point she said, "Roland, remember that time in Abuja?" And they both laughed, a private joke I wasn't part of. That was fine. I had my own joke loading. I excused myself, saying I needed water. In the kitchen, I typed a short message to a contact from CyberSafe Ltd., a company where Roland had just been hired a week ago. Subject line: Urgent, Roland Afolabi's background verification. Attached was an encrypted folder. Metadata logs from the app he'd refused to pay for, filled with very compromising information. By the time I returned to the living room, they were too busy whispering to notice the faint hum of my phone sending the email. I sat back down calm and said, "So Roland, how's work treating you?" He smiled, proud. "Man, I just got a big contract today. Life's good." I smiled wider. "Yeah," I said, "it really is." That's when thunder struck outside, loud, jarring, perfectly timed. Neither of them realized it, but in that single flash of lightning, their fates had already changed. Please subscribe as you continue. By 9 p.m. the house no longer felt like a home. The air was tense, thick enough to taste. I sat in the living room, the only light coming from the dim bulb above the dining table. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Tina had been pacing for nearly 20 minutes, her phone in hand, her perfume heavy in the air, sweet but sharp, like she'd sprayed it just to leave a mark. She looked good. Too good. Red dress, gold anklet, that same confident smirk she wore when she thought she'd won. At 9:13 there was a knock at the door. 3 firm taps. She glanced at me, then flipped her hair back and whispered, "Don't start acting childish." "I wouldn't dare," I said softly. "After all, you're entertaining a guest." She rolled her eyes and opened the door. Roland stepped in like he owned the place, tall, dark-skinned, confident. He carried that kind of ego that filled any room before his voice even did. The smell of his cologne hit first, strong, musky, familiar. He grinned when he saw me. "Kelvin, right? I've heard so much about you." I stood, extended my hand and said, "Hope it was all good things." Tina laughed, but her laugh cracked halfway through. She hadn't expected me to play polite. I studied him. He had the kind of charm that fooled people easily, the way his words flowed, the practiced confidence. The same charm that probably drew Tina back into old habits. He looked around the house, whistled and said, "Nice setup, bro. You've got taste." "Thanks," I replied. "Built most of it myself." He didn't realize how literal that was. Every smart bulb, every camera, every connection point in that house was under my control. They both sat on the couch a little too close. I remained standing, my phone in hand, pretending to scroll. In reality, I'd opened my remote access console. My home network was already tracking every device within range. When Roland connected to the Wi-Fi, automatically, thanks to his synced history from when he'd once visited months ago, I smiled. "Access granted." He didn't notice. Neither did she. As they talked, I could feel the rage humming under my skin like static, but I didn't let it surface. I listened instead. "Wash." She laughed at his jokes, placed her hand on his thigh once. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. At one point she said, "Roland, remember that time in Abuja?" And they both laughed, a private joke I wasn't part of. That was fine. I had my own joke loading. I excused myself, saying I needed water. In the kitchen, I typed a short message to a contact from CyberSafe Ltd., a company where Roland had just been hired a week ago. Subject line: Urgent, Roland Afolabi's background verification. Attached was an encrypted folder. Metadata logs from the app he'd refused to pay for, filled with very compromising information. By the time I returned to the living room, they were too busy whispering to notice the faint hum of my phone sending the email. I sat back down calm and said, "So Roland, how's work treating you?" He smiled, proud. "Man, I just got a big contract today. Life's good." I smiled wider. "Yeah," I said, "it really is." That's when thunder struck outside, loud, jarring, perfectly timed. Neither of them realized it, but in that single flash of lightning, their fates had already changed. By the next morning I could tell something had shifted, not just in the air but in her. Tina moved through the house like someone walking through invisible smoke, uncertain, uneasy. Her phone barely left her hand, her eyes darting to it every few seconds like it was her lifeline. I didn't ask questions. I just watched. I was sitting by the window, laptop open, pretending to work while the city outside yawned awake. Street vendors shouting, Danfo horns blaring, the smell of rain-soaked asphalt still hanging in the air. Then her phone rang again. She hesitated before answering. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Roland, what happened?" "Boss. No, that can't be. Are you serious? They fired you? Why?" I didn't need to hear the rest. The faint tremor in her voice said enough. She turned slowly to look at me, like I was some mirror reflecting back the things she didn't want to face. "Did you do something?" she asked quietly. I closed my laptop with a click that sounded louder than it should have. "Do something? You mean fix something that was already broken?" "Kelvin, don't play games with me," she said, voice cracking slightly. "Roland just got suspended. They said they found things, private things, linked to his company account. He swears someone set him up." I murmured, sipping my coffee. Maybe he should have updated his security systems. That's basic IT 101. She stared at me, her expression torn between anger and fear. You're scaring me." I met her eyes, calm, deliberate. "Good. You should be scared, not of me but of the choices you've made." For a moment, silence hung between us. The kind of silence that screams louder than words. Then, like a dam breaking, she started talking. "I didn't mean for things to get this bad," she said. "He reached out to me months ago just to check in. It wasn't supposed to go anywhere. I swear." Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "We just started talking about old times. He made me feel like myself again, not just someone's wife." I wanted to laugh, but instead I just nodded slowly. "So that's what this was about? Feeling alive again?" "You don't understand," she whispered. "You stopped seeing me, Kelvin. You stopped trying." Her words hit harder than I expected. For a moment, I saw flashes of the early days, her head on my shoulder, our laughter echoing in the small flat we shared before success complicated everything. I had stopped trying. But she'd stopped caring. I get it, I said finally. You wanted excitement. But you didn't just cheat on me, Tina. You invited a ghost into our home. Her lip trembled. What are you going to do? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Nothing, I said softly. That's the beauty of it. I don't have to lift a finger anymore. The world is already doing the work for me. She flinched, confusion flickering across her face. What do you mean? I stood up, walked toward her, and gently brushed past her shoulder. You'll see soon enough. Later that night, while pretending to sleep, I watched her through half-closed eyes as she crept to my desk, switched on my laptop, and started typing furiously. When she opened the hidden folder titled Truth, the color drained from her face. Her hands began to shake. She wasn't ready for what she found. Not yet. Please subscribe as you continue. The glow from the laptop cast long shadows on the walls. I watched through half-lidded eyes as Tina clicked open the folder labeled Truth. For a few seconds she just stared, unsure. Then she double-clicked a file. A video loaded, Roland's face grinning into the camera. At first she thought it was harmless. Then she realized the woman in the clip wasn't her. Or me. It was Bimp, her closest friend. Her gasp broke the stillness. She covered her mouth with both hands, backing away from the screen like it had bitten her. Then she forced herself to watch more. The videos weren't just of Bimp. There were several others, women laughing, unaware they were being filmed. I let her crumble in silence for a minute before I sat up. Couldn't sleep? I asked softly. She spun toward me, panic in her eyes. Kelvin, what is this? Where did you get these? I stood and walked closer, keeping my voice calm. Roland isn't just a liar. He's a predator. Every woman he touched, he filmed. Some with their consent, most without. He uploaded everything through my app. You see, I built it to store backups, even when deleted. Her voice trembled. You've had these all this time? Yes. I paused. And now you understand who you defended. She dropped to her knees, whispering, Oh my God. Bimp. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the laptop fan. She stayed there for a long moment, her breath shaky, her pride in shambles. I almost pitied her. Almost. That night, Roland's private hell went public. The data I'd sent to HR wasn't just corporate evidence. It was enough to raise questions beyond the office. Someone leaked the story to social media. Within hours, screenshots, audio clips, and names were circulating. The city woke up buzzing. And Tina woke up broken. Tina didn't leave the bedroom for 2 days. The boutique's phone wouldn't stop ringing, clients canceling appointments, business partners backing out. Her online followers turned from adoration to accusation overnight. Every post she'd ever made was now a battlefield. I watched her unravel quietly. There was no joy in it, not anymore. Just a deep, cold satisfaction. Once I might have comforted her, told her we'd rebuild. But this time, I let her face the silence she used to weaponize against me. When she finally emerged, she looked smaller, fragile. Please, Kelvin, she whispered. I can't take this anymore. They're saying I knew about it. That I helped him. I looked up from my desk. Did you? She shook her head violently. No, I swear. I just loved him. I finished for her. Her voice cracked. You don't understand. I never wanted this. I stood slowly, my tone quiet but sharp. That's your problem, Tina. You never want consequences. You just want chaos and forgiveness. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I saw the woman I used to love. Terrified, lost, human. But pity is dangerous. It softens the edge of revenge. She reached for my hand. Please, don't ruin me, Kelvin. I'm begging you. I gently pulled away. You already did that yourself. 3 days later, I invited her family over for dinner. I told her mother we wanted to discuss our marriage. Tina resisted, but I insisted. She arrived that evening wearing a white blouse, no makeup, eyes swollen from crying. Her family filled the dining room with awkward smiles and forced laughter. Her mother praised me for being a patient, understanding man. Her younger brother clapped my shoulder and said, You've handled my sister better than most could. I smiled politely, poured wine, and said, Let's watch something together before we eat. As I picked up the remote, Tina's eyes widened. Kelvin, don't. But it was too late. The TV flickered to life. The videos played, blurred faces, distorted voices, but enough to be unmistakable. The family's laughter turned to stunned silence. Her mother gasped. Her brother slammed the table. "What is this filth?" her mother cried. I looked directly at Tina. That's who she risked everything for. Tina screamed, lunging for the remote. "Turn it off. Turn it off." I didn't. I just stood, calm as ever, and placed a manila envelope on the table. "These are our divorce papers. Already signed." Her mother covered her mouth, whispering prayers under her breath. Tina collapsed into a chair, trembling. I said quietly, "You invited the devil into our home. I just showed you the price." Then I walked out, leaving behind the sound of her family's shouts echoing through the house. I moved out the next morning, packed what little mattered and left the rest behind, her perfume, her chaos, her noise. People expect revenge to explode. They picture screaming, smashing, maybe even blood. But the most powerful revenge is quiet. Mine was silence, precise, surgical, absolute. She called me nonstop for days. Then texts followed. Long ones. Short ones. Apologies. Confessions. Promises. I didn't reply. Every message went unanswered, every call left to ring until it died. Soon even the messages stopped. I checked the news once in a while. Roland had vanished from social media. Rumors said he'd left the country after a police inquiry started. Tina's boutique shut down, clients gone, sponsors withdrawn. In a city obsessed with image, her reputation had become radioactive. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt empty. Like I'd won a war that left the battlefield silent. One night, as I walked along the quiet streets of Lekki, the ocean breeze hit my face. A street preacher's voice drifted through the noise of traffic. "Forgiveness frees the soul." I smiled faintly. I wasn't sure if I'd forgiven her, but I was finally free. That was enough. Until one night I received a message that made my blood run cold. From Roland. "You think you've won, Kelvin? You have no idea what's coming." I stared at the message for a long time. It came from a new number, but the tone was unmistakable, Roland's arrogance laced with venom. I didn't reply. I just stared at the blinking cursor, thinking how strange it was that even in defeat, some men refused to disappear. It had been a month since the dinner. My apartment was quiet, almost too quiet. I'd started freelancing again, rebuilding my life piece by piece. I kept the lights low, music soft, mind clear. Sometimes in the early morning I'd catch myself wondering where Tina was, whether she'd found peace or just another distraction. A part of me hoped she'd learned something. Another part didn't care. That night, as dawn began to crawl across the blinds, I opened my laptop. A folder sat on my desktop, Roland Revenge Part 2. It wasn't empty. Inside were new files, digital breadcrumbs, clues about Roland's next move. He'd resurfaced online under a new alias, starting another business, another lie. I could have ignored it, moved on, started fresh. But the thing about betrayal is, it doesn't just end. It changes your wiring. You stop seeing people. You start seeing vulnerabilities, loopholes, access points. I closed the laptop, exhaled, and whispered to myself, maybe some stories aren't meant to end. Maybe they just evolve. Outside, Lagos was waking up again, buses honking, voices shouting, life moving. But in my chest there was calm. Revenge had given me peace, but peace had given me something rarer, control. As the first light of morning filled the room, I whispered, almost to the city itself, "Some stories don't end when you walk away. They just reload." Then I smiled, the same quiet, deliberate smile that started it all, and shut the laptop. Subscribe, like, comment, and share for more interesting stories.